Hi, everyone. I'm Igor Sternberg, and we are here to celebrate the new critically acclaimed film, The Vigil, one of the scariest films of the year. We've got with us nearly the entire cast for a sort of reunion for our panel discussion. And joining us are our writer-director Keith Thomas, actors Dave Davis, Malky Goldman, Dun Laskey, and Ronald Cohen, and producer Raphael Margules. Thank you all for being here so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So we've had a lot of religious horror movies, primarily made through the Christian and Catholic lens with Omens and Exorcists. And it turns out that this Jewish horror film is sort of an exorcism film of a kind just as well. The exorcism of guilt, of shame, of fear. And I would love to find out from you, Keith, where this all started from. This story feels so personal, yet it's very much unlike most of the horror films we see today. So I'd love to find out where the roots are for this story. Where did it come from?
Sure. So the story is really a mix of all sorts of things. It's a lot of personal history and personal thoughts and ideas mixed in with a sort of, I wanted to make my first film and I needed to kind of come up with the vehicle to do that. I knew it was going to be horror because I like horror quite a bit. And I thought that would make a great first film in this genre, combining essentially what I hadn't seen before with what I know. What I hadn't seen before was a truly Jewish horror film. We'd seen films with Dybbuk boxes and families attacked by Dybbuks and things like that, but we hadn't seen a film that took place within a truly Jewish milieu and through that lens. And I thought, okay, that's something I can do. Like I can come up with that. And so then the Shomer idea came in, and then once I had this idea of a guy watching a body in a house alone, I was able to kind of fill that box with just all my own personal demons and whatever, all these different ideas.
And where did the idea of the Mazik monster come from, which is not a familiar figure at all, really? We've encountered the books and we've all encountered a golem, but I don't think many of us have heard of a Mazik before. So it was kind of the origin of that connection.
Yeah, we're going to make the Mazik a star, right? As soon as everyone's going to be afraid of a Mazik. The new boogeyman. Really it came out of a place of just me being sick of Dybbuks. There's just too many Dybbuks. And I wanted something that felt fresh and different. And so it came down to just kind of digging into text. And there's lots of places where you can find lists and lists of demons and things in different cultures. And I don't remember where I found the Mazik originally, but once I saw the name, I thought, hey, that's cool. Let's use that. Did some digging around into rabbinic, literature and found little descriptions of it, and thought, okay, that's enough that I can build something off of and kind of create something that felt both original and still true to that world. It was something that, I wasn't making it entirely up. It was something that existed, was ancient, but there was enough to it that I could build my own Mazik.
A question to Don, Ronald, Malky, Dave. Did you know anything about the Mazik before reading the script? Did you do any research to familiarize yourself with it?
Malky, you want to take that?
Sure. I knew about the word, but I had no idea what it meant. So yes, I did a little bit of research, and I read the script, and I knew everything I needed to know. It was all in there. Anyone else?
I heard the name. I heard of the Mazik. I didn't know much about it until I sat down with Keith, and we had a discussion, and we spoke more about it. And then that's when I learned more about it.
And Dave, as the star of this movie, you are not just the star of this movie. You're literally, I think, like Kabiri and Fellini's Knights of Kabiri. You're in every single scene, and at least in half of them, you're alone. We know you from The Walking Dead. We've seen you in True Detective. Can you tell us about carrying the weight of being in every single scene of a film? And what kind of collaboration did you have with Keith that helped further define your character?
Yeah, well, it's just like when people say, how do you memorize all those lines? And I always say, just one at a time. So, having more scenes to work on, it's just more information to build the character out of. It's more stuff in the script to draw on. And Keith and I started working real early in the process, discussing where Yaakov comes from and the sort of world that he lives in and is going into as he's shifting communities at this really difficult time in his life. And then when I got to New York, Malky introduced me to a lot of her friends, and Malky is a former member of the community. And through talking to real people whose experiences are similar to that of Yaakov's, I was able to start to understand who Yaakov is, where he comes from, what his relationship to American secular culture is. When was he first exposed to it? When was he first exposed to English? You know, and that really started to inform how he spoke and moved. And then it was a matter of doing a lot of work, listening to Yiddish, talking to people, a lot of observation, a lot of bothering Malky in the middle of the night, asking her how to pronounce things, or what would be an alternate way to say this word, or is that the only translation for this? And
I loved it.
and yeah, we had a blast. It was a truly unique challenge for me as an actor, something I had always wanted to attempt, to act in a language that I don't speak. And it just created more work, which meant more to dig into, which was great. And, you know, I loved it.
I was really impressed how Dave did not just want to learn his lines. He just wanted to learn everything around his lines and what he's saying and how many ways he can say that. It was really, really impressive, Dave, how you did that.
Thank you, Malky. And yeah, and you know, learning the other lines as well, because as they say, acting is reacting, and it's all about listening. So I couldn't just learn my lines. I had to learn Menashe's lines and Malky's lines so that I could understand exactly what I was listening to on a word by word basis.
Wow. And Rafi, how did you first get involved in the film? How involved were you in bringing the film from Denver, Colorado, where I think the film was originally set in the first draft of the script, to New York? How different did the original story look before you took on the role as a producer? And what was it that you had helped add to it?
So the way it started is Keith's manager sent us the script and basically said, I have a project that only you guys should make. And what he meant by that is that we're producers that focus primarily on genre movies, you know, horror, thriller, sci-fi, and whatnot. And we are from an Orthodox community and continue to be practicing Orthodox Jews. So there's not many Orthodox Jewish horror producers out there in the business. So it was pretty literal when he said, and you guys are the ones who can make this. And then we read the script. We obviously fell for it and loved it. And the general premise of the film is how you see it in the movie today. You know, the character arc, the emotion, the scares, all of that stuff was there. And when we met with Keith, we realized how much we saw eye to eye and wanted to make the same movie. And I think where we were kind of evaluated, besides, you know, putting the whole thing together, was we were just like, Keith, if we're going to go into this, if we're going to do this together, and we're going to make a Jewish horror movie, we don't want to make a Jewish horror movie, we want to make the Jewish horror movie. So we talked about setting it in Brooklyn as opposed to Denver, because that's the most Jewish place on earth. We talked about leading into the Yiddish. We talked about the Holocaust backstory. We talked about a lot of different elements, and we developed the script for this new way that we were going to make the movie on a somewhat larger level than how Keith was initially going to make it in Denver, where he's from. Yeah, I think that's more or less it. Oh, Fred Melamed is here.
Hi.
How are you, Fred? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I tried to get in earlier, but I couldn't for some reason. But anyway, happy to join you all now.
Thank you so much for being here. And with Fred here, Rafi and Keith, can you talk about the casting process? How did you get in touch with Fred, with Malky, with Dave, Ronald? How did you guys put together this amazing cast?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you want, I'll talk quickly about kind of New York. And, you know, it was really, for us, it was all about finding authentic voices, really. Authentic voices in terms of the community, in terms of, you know, meeting kind of what expectations would be in terms of people who were both fluent in Yiddish, people who understood the community, but also, you know, folks like Dave, who are, you know, just these very gifted kind of emotional actors. And so it's kind of a combination of it, you know, it really went with gut. I'll let Rafi talk about Fred in terms of kind of how that idea came about in terms of Dr. Kohlberg and you know, the voice we both heard in our heads from the very beginning.
Well, I just wanted to also just backtrack on some of the other cast before we get to Fred, which I'm very excited to talk about. I'm so happy to see you again, Fred. It's been a minute. A lot of the actors in this movie are actual ex-Hasidic actors. Aside from Dave and obviously, of course, Lynn and Ron, Menashe still being a practicing Hasidic actor, but a lot of the people in the beginning, all of the people rather in the early scene at what is a Footsteps meetings are real ex-Hasidic actors that have experience with Footsteps. So authenticity was definitely the main word that was driving this beyond horror and Jewish. I would say the third most popular word that we were always throwing around was authenticity. We wanted this movie to be dripping with a Jewish sensibility. So, and then when it came to casting our final role, that was the role of the psychiatrist on the phone, Dr. Kohlberg, and Fred was the person immediately who we wanted to go to. We didn't go out to any other actors. We were always hoping he was going to say yes, and thankfully Fred responded to the material, and obviously he's one of the greater character actors working today. So we're really grateful to be able to work with Fred on this movie. It was kind of the linchpin of our entire casting process.
And Fred, what drew you to this script? Why did you agree to sign on and play this role in this film?
Well, I'm always interested in stories, any kind of story, told among a kind of a sub-society. That always fascinates me. And the fact that I'm a Jew myself and grew up in New York, was never a Hasid, but had friends in the Orthodox community, although my parents were kind of lefties and, didn't kind of made fun of it all. I was never bar mitzvahed or any of that stuff, but I started to believe in God as an adult myself without any great Jewish education. But to me, kind of the smaller a community is that you address in a film, in a sense, the more universal it is. So I thought this was a really fascinating idea. And I read the material and I really thought it was, beautifully written. So before I saw any, when I came in, most of the film was shot. I think the entire film was shot pretty much. And the performances that I got to see, I only saw stuff that my actual small little contribution related to. But Dave's performance in particular, I thought was, remarkably moving and good. And I thought we deserved, as the Jewish community, to have a really good, high quality, scary film. I was always an Exorcist fan, to use the kind of reference that almost everybody is aware of. But I thought the idea of making a genuinely scary film that takes the fact that it's a hermetic community, a small community, seriously, and doesn't make fun of it, but talks about it for what it is, with both everything that is insular and frightening about that, and also everything that is advantageous about it, kind of puts it in the film. When you see Menashe in the film, it's for me anyway, it was impossible not to think about his earlier film and what that's like to be, I don't want to say a pariah, maybe pariah is too strong of a word, but to definitely not have the full blessing of the community. And, Dave's character is somebody trying to leave, but obviously short of money, having a hard time making a living, and torn in that. And it's not that he doesn't believe, it's you can be a Jew very much, but still not want to be part of that community. But that when you make that decision is not taken lightly, as you know, by other members of the community. So part of the idea of being alone, being alienated from everyone, which literally happens to Dave, of course, but I think in a way it happens to everybody in the community who says, well, I don't think I can live this way. So I just thought it was a fascinating look into a small community that everybody can understand in a way.
And
my
I'm
long-winded answer to your question.
Oh, fantastic response. And my further question to all the rest of the staff is, the rest of the cast is, have you had a chance to ever, or did you ever sit Shomer? Did anyone on the cast sit Shomer and have that experience?
I have a story actually with that. So when Keith was talking to me about the script, I remembered a story. When I was in yeshiva in Los Angeles, there was a rabbi, a similar story. He came over to me and he said, it's somebody that I worked with in the past. And he said, you know, there's somebody who doesn't have, somebody in the family just passed away. This is literally in the beginning of the story, is exactly the same. He comes over to me and he says, we need someone to say Tillim by this dead body who's going to be buried tomorrow. Can you and a friend come to the cemetery and in the, what do you call that, the room outside wherever the body is, right? Wherever they hold the bodies, right? So me and my friend were sitting there for a bit and we're saying Tillim, and he goes, and you see the body literally wrapped up exactly how you see it in the movie, just a cloth on top of the body. And I'm like, if that goddamn thing moves, and that's all I'm thinking, you know? And he goes, you know, I'm gonna go see if the rabbi's here to pick us up. I said, no, you're not going nowhere without me. I'm coming with you, you know? Because it actually is that, you do kind of get that feeling, you know, the body's dead, like, why should you think? And then here's this movie that actually, you know, made my nightmares come true. And I was able to be part of, and so I actually did do that before.
Keith, have you sat Shomer or Dave? No.
I wouldn't qualify.
Right, and I have not either. I know a lot of folks who have, for largely family members and friends, which is, you know, the most common situation. But I was always fascinated by the paid showmers, the idea, you know, just like Dun was talking about, of somebody who for some money will watch a body of somebody who has nobody to watch it. I thought it's both touching, you know, this is this person who has nobody, and then someone will sit with them. And at the same time, that's the perfect setup for a horror film, because there's no connection. There's no sort of emotional connection between these two. And how can you turn that into something?
And I want to ask this question to everyone. Was there ever a moment during production where unexplained moments ever occurred behind the scenes, like we've heard happen in movies like Poltergeist or Exorcist? It's such a creepy film. I just want to know, did you guys get a sense to see and experience something really creepy that's outside the arm of production?
I mean, the house we were in, that we filmed in, was a real house, and and there was an elderly woman who had lived in the house up until a few months before we got in there. And a lot of her stuff was in the house, you know, the drapery and the carpeting, and we kept all of that. So there was sort of I remember the first time we visited, Rafi and I went and visited the house in person, and particularly at night. We just needed to feel it, the ambiance. And I remember being upstairs in the room where Ms. Litvak is in the film, and it was very dark. I thought, oh, it's Brooklyn. There'll still be a lot of street lights and stuff, but it was dark. It was incredibly dark in that house. And so there was a certain atmosphere, a certain kind of thing. I would say definitely the scariest thing that happened in terms of the on set was Dave's encounter with the spider, which Dave can talk about.
Well, so the first time I was reading the script, you know, Keith and I had talked about it, and this was before I had read the script, and he told me a lot of this film is going to be on you, and the fear that you're seeing and the sort of emotional and mental trauma that Yaakov is going through. So that was on my mind as I was reading the script, and I was reading it out loud to my girlfriend, and I was doing my best job possible, making it as spooky as possible, like I was reading a ghost story. And I would just sort of look over her shoulder into the corner of the room, trying to get her to go, what are you looking at? And in my head, I was attempting to summon demons. And I thought it was a fun game to play on my first read through of the script. The next thing I know, there's the largest spider I've ever seen crawling on the wall behind her. And, you know, sort of like Boy Who Cried Wolf. She was like, no, I don't believe you this time. Ah! And I thought it was a tarantula. That's how big it was. And she told me, no, it's a wolf spider. So we dealt with the spider. She dealt with the spider. And we kept reading. And about a page and a half later, the wolf spider makes an appearance. And I thought that was just an insane kismet. And it was not the last thing that happened. That script, reading the script in bed was banned at nighttime.
Well, the house, the whole house was so creepy. And then we are all upstairs trying to keep silence because, it's filming. And then we put down a can of, I don't know, something on a bench. And then you can't pick it up. It's sticky. And then you can't help but think, wait, what the fuck is happening? And then you realize, oh, it's just an old, stinky, dirty house and it's sticky everywhere. But there were definitely these moments where you're just like, wait, am I delusional, or I don't know, am I going crazy, or the demons take over this house?
I want to ask this question to Keith and Rafi. I'm curious about the cinematography in the film. It's very unique. You're taking a lot of risks in having so many rich blacks in it. It's very dark. It feels influenced in a way almost by Rembrandt's chiaroscuro technique. Like you're truly utilizing those contrasts. And it clearly is creating a sense of ominous feeling because, we're always afraid of things we can't see in those shadows. What were the approaches and your attitude towards cinematography and creating that visual language in the film?
Yeah, I would think it's interesting. If you did a word search in the script, you'd probably find chiaroscuro like 5 times. I kept putting it in there. It was, twofold in some ways. Number one, it's always more frightening what you don't see or what you think you see than what you actually see. It's, why Alien was so successful in terms of bits and pieces of the alien before you, and your brain is attempting to put this thing into shape, and your brain will always come up with something much worse than any special effects person can build. So it was that sort of fear of the dark, like let's really lean into that. It was also budgetary. But for me, and Rafi and I talked a lot about this, and I spent a ton of time with our amazing cinematographer, Zach Cooperstein, in terms of building the world of the house. It's a very contained film. We're in this house for the majority of the runtime, and we're in 1 or 2 rooms for most of it. It was kind of like, how do you build out a space in such a small space? We shot with anamorphic lenses, and these are old Kowa lenses that have incredible distortion on the edges that just add additional atmosphere and expand the space. It's funny watching the film because the house on the film looks actually bigger than the house we were in. So that's a weird kind of artifact of that. But, I really, from the beginning, and Zach and I really worked closely on this, and then with our colorist in post, I wanted those blacks to be as rich and deep and dark. I wanted them to feel like puddles, that there was a hidden depth to them. It wasn't, I love the idea that you could see a corner and that maybe the shape where the 2 walls meet, that there's obviously maybe, those shadows are, a centimeter deep, but I love the idea that you could reach your hand in them and then you just disappear and something could emerge, and that sort of, it's kind of painting with that. So that was really, really important in terms of our lighting and figuring out all that out. And then again with these lenses and then the camera movements, I knew very early on, it's just an aesthetic taste and approach that I didn't want to do handheld. I did not want to do, sort of, there's a visceralness to handheld that is very effective, but I didn't want that. I wanted a very sort of omnipotent, prowling view. And right. Zach, was just really, really gifted at, when we're doing these dolly moves, figuring out exactly kind of where we're hitting things and how we're getting to them to maximize the light, and all the light's practical as well. So, it was all very intentional. I would say it's all very intentional. Took a long time to develop, a lot of time in pre-production to get it to where we wanted it. And because of Zach's work, it really just stands out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there was a scene where you went handheld when Dave's character is leaving the house, and then his character is now being sort of spiritually or physically somehow being dragged back to the house. That went handheld. Is there a reason?
Yeah. So this is.
I am so happy that you asked that question. It's like,
yeah, Rafi loves this question
because it's when you read books about indie filmmaking, they're about this question.
Right, they're about these sort of moments. So listen, I'll say this. That is not what I intended for that scene. Wow. I think it works. At the time, I was not sure at all. So the scene begins with dolly. We dollied as Dave goes down the stairs, he goes to the corner, we dolly across the street. It's when he turns that corner that things go to hell. And then you'll see on, as he's going back towards the house, we're dollying again, right? So we shot all that first.
Mhm.
When we got around that corner, the NYPD decided that our 5 hours worth of setups were going to be condensed to 45 minutes. This happens when it's 3 a.m. and you're making a lot of noise. Look, we had permits. This was all fully legal.
At this time, I'm pacing around in character, completely in my own head, and I look up and I see that something's going on. I notice people are talking to police, and I go over to Keith. What's going on? He explains the situation, and I very calmly said, "Are we fucked?" And Keith said, "I think we might be. I'm not sure."
So what we ended up doing is, of course, tearing the camera off of the dolly and, just leaving the track behind and just really winging it. I mean, it's one of these situations where like I said, I had like 5 hours of shots planned in 45 minutes. And here's the one thing that I realized quickly was that if there's any sequence in the film to do this, it's probably this one, because it's such a heightened visceral experience. Dave's body is breaking apart as he's around that corner. He's falling into trash cans. He's crawling on the literal Brooklyn sidewalk. And there's this thing, the Mazik approaching him. So it's so heightened and so visceral that I thought, okay, maybe this will work. But it ended up going from that very sort of controlled thing that I'd been doing the whole film to this very sort of, right, like Rafi said, very indie, very Evil Dead, sort of like whip the camera around, let's run at Dave's face with the camera and see what happens. Let's just try to capture it. And I will say those 45 minutes, they were some of the longest and yet shortest 45 minutes in my life. It was definitely a moment where I was like, did I get a shot? I have no idea. I'm not able to see anything. I'm just running around. And afterwards, when it was said and done, and the cops were like, okay, that's it. I went over to Rafi, who was at the monitor and been watching all this. And, to Rafi's credit, he said, you know what? I know that was chaotic and that was crazy, but he said, I think you're going to be amazed by what you see. And I think you're going to really, really love it. And he was right. It wasn't until I really got in the edit when we were sitting there, I was like, hey, you know what? This actually worked for what we wanted.
And the reason why I'm so glad and thank you, Keith, but the reason why I'm so glad you asked the question is because you hear so many stories about how lower budget movies come together, from obviously from something like Jaws to, which wasn't that low budget at the time, I guess, to Robert Rodriguez's first movie, El Mariachi. And you always hear about the filmmakers being complimented on something that was completely unintentional. Like in Jaws, obviously, everybody knows the famous story that the shark wasn't working properly. And then they had to kind of improvise with the POV footage of the shark, which is now what we remember from Jaws. The scariest stuff in Jaws is the POV stuff. And then El Mariachi, I remember Robert Rodriguez always saying, everybody complimented me on the lighting. And I'd say, thank you so much, but we didn't have any lighting in this movie. So I love that you're the second person to have brought up that question. And to me, it's just so, I love that it exists. It was also, this was such a smooth production. The Vigil production went so well. And then all of a sudden, the last day of production, this just happened. The police showed up. They were like, you're making too much noise. We're shutting you down. Even though we were allowed to be there. But they were like, we don't care. It's like the neighbors are complaining, we're shutting you down. And just like watching Keith, and everything fell apart. Again, this was our last day. We were about to celebrate. And Keith, I just see Keith running around with the camera, and like, it was just the controlled nature of our production completely evaporated. And then, but it ended up working out great. And then Keith, something that I realized we never talk about is like, the production ended so anticlimactically. Like there was no celebration. It was like, people like, because we wanted to like let go of all of our crew that didn't need to be there anymore to quiet things down. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, the cops were like, that's it. And we're like, I guess we're done shooting. And then the whole production was over. And we didn't really get a chance to like congratulate and say goodbye. And I remember that feeling of it being anticlimactic, but it worked out.
Maybe we can still do it. And Fred, maybe you can have your bar mitzvah finally.
That would be great. That would be great.
2 in 1.
Can I just ask a question that I'm curious about?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge Ron and the late great Len Cohen, who I had the pleasure of being in with a couple of other movies, who I'm certainly sorry is not here, but was also, I thought, was terrific and terrific in everything. But my question is a separate question. So here's what I was thinking. When The Exorcist came out in 1974 or 5, whenever it was, one review said that people who are Catholic, who are religious, should be offended by this film. And another review, a famous review, came out in the New Yorker, said, on the contrary, this is the greatest commercial for the Catholic Church that has ever been produced. So my question is, somebody who is not necessarily part of the, not necessarily a Lubavitcher or not necessarily part of a tight community, but somebody who is religious and believes strongly, do you think that this film will find that will confirm them in their feelings, or is it likely that they will find it impious or irreligious, or maybe not neither one? I'm just curious what you think as filmmakers.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and we've, Malky showed it to folks who live in the community. She's been able to have them look at it. I would say from the reactions that I've gotten, it's kind of been both ways, weirdly enough. I think it really depends on what angle you're coming from. Folks who are religious and have seen this film as a sort of confirmation of their beliefs in a lot of ways. I would say that was very true with the band that did the song at the very end of the film, which is this band Zusha, who are essentially hipster Chassids. They kind of make this. And when I showed it to them in Crown Heights, I screened the film for them to get approval to use this songs. These are very religious people. They'd never seen a horror film in their lives. I don't think they'd seen many films at all in their lives. And the experience was overwhelming in some ways for them because they were very scared. They'd never seen anything like this. But at the end of the day, they approved the song because they felt the spiritual themes in the film. The overall sort of message was very much in line with their music and the religiosity that they believed in. At the same time, I've definitely heard from folks who have left the Hasidic community who felt as though it spoke to them in that it made real or somehow true the conflict and the emotion, and the fact that the film essentially ends ambiguously with Dave essentially saying, I'm not going to morning prayers today, not today, and then kind of walking off. And we don't know where he's headed, but they liked the ambiguity of that, of yes, I'm letting some things go, but I don't know exactly where the future path will take me.
I think that what Keith's trying to explore in this movie is just truth, right? And truth is not black or white, but these are the characters' truths that they're experiencing over the course of this film. My business partner and I are Orthodox practicing Jews. And one of the things that attract us most to the project is being able to make obviously an accessible, scary horror movie, but that's based in a community that we always see portrayed in media as either dehumanizing or victimizing. And we just wanted to tell a story in this community. And it was always really important. Keith and I always talked about, we don't want to make a preachy movie. The intention is not to make a preachy movie, but at the same time, we don't want to make a movie that's anti-Orthodoxy either. We really just wanted to make something that just explores a story and a character, and people will walk away from the movie with whatever they're going to walk away with. And, of my Orthodox friends, and I'm just thinking about, we've done so many Jewish film festival circuits and interviews now, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive from different elements of the Orthodox community. So it hasn't been portrayed deemed offensive at all. I think that everybody's really responding to it in their own way, which is a very fine line, but thankfully I think was accomplished. But it's a great question.
I want to add to that. So I grew up Hasidic, ultra Orthodox, and my family still is. Some of my siblings secretly watch movies, so I got it to my sister. And the reason she loved it, she tried to explain to me that it was one person's experience, and it wasn't pointing fingers. These are Hasidim, or this is what happens to someone who leaves the community. It was just one individual's experience and struggle. And Fred, you pointed out something that really touched my heart when you said that loneliness of not feeling accepted. And it was so crucial to this movie. And it also made me realize how many people in the community that also feel that not being accepted, or that being alone, this is just so universal to so many people. So for people who are religious, they almost took it as in, like, you leave and it's still not easy, it's still struggling, so you might as well stay. People who left feel, oh, you get it, it's really so hard. So because this film is just one person's struggle, individual struggle, we all feel for it. And we are not, this film doesn't say, oh, look at Hasidim, they're so funny and they're so naive. It is just, they are exposed to this amount of knowledge, and then you leave and you're exposed to that, and then what happens when you mix your worlds. And then one more thing, my sister was so happy that he struggles with mental health, because then she can say demons don't exist, he made it up. So it was just really great. It was so not black and white, and that made it so real and authentic.
I can definitely agree with what Keith said and Malky said, that it's, you have both sides. You have it's kind of, split down the middle. So I would agree with both of you guys. Also, growing up extremely Orthodox, and now I'm still Orthodox, but definitely way more modern than how my parents are. And half my family, and kind of half and half type of thing.
Yeah. I have a question to you. I don't know if you were religious growing up, but I'm curious how the immersion into this particular story may have changed you. I know it was a quick shoot. It was less than 3 weeks, but it's really intense. Did it help you reconnect with your faith?
Well, I was in New York for about a month and a half for this process, and for me, obviously, faith is a large part of this film, and it was a large part of my exploration of Yaakov. But my way into Yaakov was through a community that some people don't appreciate the term, but called Off the Derek, OTD, Off the Path, and there are varying opinions. Now, some people here can give more firsthand understanding of that, but there's varying levels, as there are in any community, of how do you feel towards your faith, and where are you on your own personal journey of understanding and separating yourself from your parents and your community. And those were the people that I was really interested in meeting and talking to. So one of the questions I asked was, do you believe in God? And there were a multitude of answers, and some people did believe and some people didn't believe, and some people actively rejected it as a part of rejecting a community that was rejecting them and their life decisions. And some people were struggling through that and trying to understand how to maintain a faith while rejecting a community, or how to maintain a community while the community is rejecting you. So those were really all parts of my exploration of Yaakov. And as far as understanding my own personal Jewish heritage, it was really incredible, because here's a community that I had very little experience with prior to beginning this film. And through exploring it, I started to learn how close I really am to it. The more Yiddish I learned, the more Yiddish I realized I already knew. And I like to, it's true, and it's strange. I had studied Hebrew as a kid. I didn't understand it, but I could read it a little bit. And the Yiddish came more naturally to me in the film than the Hebrew did. And it was because there was something about the Yiddish that was in the bones of my family. It was in the way that my grandparents inflect their sentences and the sentence structures that my great grandmother would use. It was there. We were filming out in Williamsburg one night, and a guy came up to Menashe and he said something, and I said, "What did he say?" And Menashe said, "Nothing, he's a nudge." And I said, "Nudge? My mom's been calling me that my whole life. I think I know what it means, but what does it mean?" And Menashe said, "A nudge is it's a guy who you say, 'Hey, how you doing?' and he actually gives you an answer." And it was just little experiences like that every day. I'd come off set and I'd call my dad and go, Did you know that this was yeah, I knew that was Yiddish. I just never told you it was Yiddish." I was like, "Oh, you didn't know. You're messing with me." And I got to throw in a couple sayings here or there that I had learned from my family, which really meant a lot to them and a lot to me. And so it was an incredible exploration of my heritage. And as a result, but exploring the religious part of it and the faith part of it was more an exploration of character, and less about the actual religious aspect. It was, but the tying of the tefillin in the film was an incredibly meaningful piece to me. My great grandfather tied tefillin every day, and it was something I had never done. And as someone who enjoys meditation, I really connected with that.
Yeah, just to be a little facetious though, that particular scene reminds me a little bit of like, Evil Dead 2. There's like
I love that.
It's like a Rambo Evil Dead montage.
I love that.
But it's awesome. No, it really does set up the character. He's going into combat. He's going into fight the evil force. So I know we're running out of time, but I want to talk about the ending because it's a very interesting ending for a genre film. We're talking about two men who are kind of exorcised through one man. And what discussions did you have about finding closure to this story? Because this is an ending that is actually really strong and satisfying. It's redemptive. And that's not something we usually see in current contemporary genre films, like, Sam Raimi's, Drag Me to Hell, which is painful for the viewer. So I'm curious if we could talk about that ending and how you came to decide that you were going to close the film that way.
Before Keith said anything, I wanted Jakob to get dragged to hell.
He wanted the Mazik to win.
I was open to that also.
I for me, it was important that it had a cathartic ending, that there was this sort of, that things were resolved in a weird way. It was very Jewish. A demon in Judaism is still part of a higher power. It is not, there's no duality. There's no evil that is dueling against a higher power that's controlling demons that are attempting to sway a human back or forth. Any demon that exists would be part of the same higher power. And so therefore a demon's function would be to try to help somebody improve. So rather than damn them. So I thought we had to have a sort of cathartic, and if he could defeat the demon, then that was the purpose. It was wanting to be defeated. It's just poor Mr. Litvak never could. He didn't. He couldn't do it, and he suffered for it. Whereas Yaakov was able to defeat it, and so then you get this very cathartic moment. It's interesting that the very end of the film is this out of focus shot as Dave has walked down the street. He's kind of turned out of frame. And then we linger, and this has caused the most kind of questions and stuff. It's in the film, we see a dark shape emerge from the house and begin to follow Dave. However, I will say that I have seen so many different opinions and encountered people telling me, they didn't see a dark figure, that I don't know what's happening. I think they're just waiting for the credits, and maybe they're looking at their phones. They don't see it.
That's like,
right.
yes.
It's very quick. It's really quick.
It's a subtle thing. Then people who do see the dark figure, they're like, oh, that's just one of the rabbis or somebody. It's interesting how, and then there were people kind of building interpretations on the film based on kind of whatever they're seeing in that last sequence. It's funny because it seemed it's out of focus for a reason, in that I wanted to keep it somewhat vague, but I had a very clear idea of what we were doing. And yet, I suppose the vagueness in the structure of how we did it has kind of really opened it up to this sort of many interpretations, which has kind of been fascinating. Sequel.
That shot too for me was very sort of cathartic, because the film is very difficult and there's a lot going on, and we spent a lot of time doing dolly shots, and it's sort of this dance, and Keith from the beginning gave me this wonderful freedom, which is, I think, sort of rare for an actor, where he would say, I want you to take as long as possible to do the thing that is the action in this shot. And if you think it's too long, do it twice as long. And that was like a really beautiful freedom to have, because I got to live in Yaakov's bones. And in that final shot, it's this long walk down a block, and we spent so much time trapped in this house, and this is riding off into the sunset. So it was a really lovely
pursued by a demon.
to play with. Sorry.
Running off into the sunset, pursued by a demon.
Right. Excellent, pursued by bear. But you know, just to get to play with Zach, our DP, and to live in that moment of understanding where Yakov has been through all this, he's been on this journey, and for a second he gets to just breathe and think about what he's just experienced and literally look back at it and observe it and then move forward into the future. And however you want to interpret what that future is for him or how he decides to lead his life, it was just a cathartic scene, even though albeit a simple one.
So I think we have time for one more question, and I gotta direct this to Keith. Rumor has it that you're adapting this book by this unknown author called Stephen King, called Firestarter. Would love to just get some knowledge on how you're approaching that particular novel that already had an adaptation made, for all of the fans that are listening in right now. What do you want to share with them as a teaser?
Sure. So I think for me, Firestarter was something that I was very into as a kid. The book first, and then I saw the film later. And I think that what we're doing with this new Firestarter appeals to people who both love the book and appreciate the original film, but want something more. And I guess I would say that something more is the same thing we kind of explored in the Vigil, which is a very kind of emotional, very visceral approach. The Vigil is one man's dark night of the soul, struggling with pain and trauma and guilt and inherited trauma in this community. Firestarter is very much about fathers and daughters, about families, about how you raise a child, how you guide a child, and how a child guides you. So it's really leaning much more into what I think is the very DNA of the book, which is kind of that relationship and how that relationship can be both explosive and in this case, pyrotechnic, but also life altering, life changing, in terms of how people become both the daughter and the father they were always meant to be, and maybe leave behind lives that they thought they knew. So if you liked the kind of visceral, emotional sort of punch in the Vigil, I think you'll find the same thing in Firestarter.
And Ron, we haven't heard from you. What was your experience like working with Keith? This was his first feature film, but this is one of several films you have already performed in. What was your experience like working in the Vigil?
I wish I could say, excuse me, so much has happened to me since that it's become sort of a blurred memory. But I do remember how absolutely easy it was. He was so genial and open as a director and just so welcoming on the set. And of course, I'd already read the script and I was impressed by the topography, because when he wanted a big effect, the font kind of jumped up to 20 point. And I thought, well, he really knows what he wants, I guess. And it was really just a pleasure working with him. The scene where my head was turned around, I don't even know if that's in the movie.
Yeah, it's in there.
I thought this was working.
You look
like,
great.
Yeah.
You look great. Very creepy.
It's like working in the way they must have done it back in 1910. Here's
Old school
another guy.
practical effects.
Yeah, very high.
And
tech.
Ron, we were talking about the celebration and the anticlimactic end of the filming process. But correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Lynn's drink was bourbon, right?
Yeah, she liked bourbon.
I brought a bottle of bourbon on that final night in honor of Lynn, and I made sure everybody on the crew got a shot of it at the end, and I had a note that said it was from Lynn and I.
Good.
Yeah, we've had the privilege of having Lynn Cohen at our festival, the wonderful actor, to those of you who may not know her, from A Sex and the City and Steven Spielberg's Munich. She passed away a year ago last month.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, Keith, what was your relationship like with her on set? And did you have a discussion with her about her accent, this thick Eastern European accent? What was your discussion?
For sure. No, she was absolutely wonderful. She's the kind of, she had so much experience, such a wealth that, she was able to just do it, just be there, just immediately inhabiting this body. I would say, the things I really loved about working with Lynn is she both cherished the idea of being the creepy old lady that she gets to play to a certain extent, and scared Dave in some of those moments. But at the same time, it was personal, and the accent she's using, the voice and the mannerisms, is her own grandmother. She's kind of channeling that, as well as her. There's a sequence where she speaks of pogroms, and that was a part of her family history as well. So it was both touching and personal for her in that she was kind of embodying her own history, and at the same time it was fun that it's a horror film and she gets to play the person that people are initially frightened of.
And this goes out to all the actors, Fred, Don, Ronald, Malky, Dave. Do you guys see yourself making another genre film in the future? Would you be comfortable and excited to be a part of a genre film, a horror film?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I said I wasn't gonna do another one, and then Keith reached out, and I read the script and went, "Okay, I'm making an exception."
Well, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what's next for some of you? What next film we can see you at, or what next film you're going to be behind your camera at, aside from Keith? What projects are some of you working on? We have an audience question in that regard.
I'm excited to have a project coming out in the near future. I'm not sure exactly when, and it's the first project that I produced. So that I'm looking forward to.
Well, you always get in trouble by talking too much, so I never know what I can say or not. There's a film, I'm going to Europe soon, and then right after that, in the summer, to LA, which is another Jewish, like a thriller as well, which I'm really excited. It's so interesting with the question you asked if we want to be in that genre again. Someone asked me, actually, I think it was in the post, she's like, how do you act scary? And I'm like, you don't act scary. You act the same thing, except this time you find a nice person within yourself and a demon within yourself. And unfortunately, we all have them all. So to me, I would just want challenging work, and I say yes to everything that I like. I mean,
Well, Malky, I don't know if you know this, but you're actually going to be appearing in 3 of our films at our upcoming festival.
Oh my God.
We have you in, this is a giveaway, so everyone who's listening in, this is an exclusive. We have you in Holy Woman, Woman of Valor, and The Short Crumbs. So really excited to have the festival that you're just so big and a big part of. Excited.
I also, I had the honor to be with Malky and Crumbs.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's in post, I think, right now.
I just want to list a couple of things if I can.
Yeah.
I have a series right now called WandaVision, a big tentpole series, which is on Disney, which is a Marvel show. I have another film that will be soon on a streamer called Shiva Baby, which was a big hit at Toronto this year, which I think people might get a kick out of. It's about a young woman who works kind of as a sort of semi-prostitute with a sugar daddy. And she goes to a Shiva with her family from somebody that she doesn't know, and runs into this guy with his family, with his wife and children. That's what that film is about. And then I have another one also opening quite soon called Together, which was a big hit at Sundance. Interesting film about a guy who hires a surrogate to have a baby with, and his relationship with the surrogate. They don't fall in love, but it's an interesting relationship that they have. And then I'm doing another film. Well, that's enough already. Thank you. I'm supposed to start later this year. If COVID permits it, I got my second injection today. I'm happy to report. If the film business picks up sufficiently enough, I have a film, a very interesting film with a guy that I've collaborated with many times before. Very unusual filmmaker called S. Craig Zoller. And this stars me and Vince Vaughn. It's about a young boy who is orphaned, who's born extremely odd looking with one eye and one arm. And it's sort of Dickensian story, kind of in the AI mold, about how people abuse him his entire life, and yet he maintains this kind of positivity. I'm looking forward to starting that later this year.
Fred, you're in every Craig Zoller movie, no?
Yes, this is our fifth collaboration. Yeah,
Wow.
he when he made his very first one, he friended me on Facebook, and he said, "I would like you to be in every movie I make." So I was so touched by that, and they've all been interesting movies.
We're very much looking forward to the conclusion of WandaVision tomorrow, Fred, and a wonderful cap to a great season. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Keith, Dave, Rafi, Malky, Dun, Ronald, Fred, thank you so much for a movie that is something to be really proud of. Something that I've seen through the crack of my fingers at Toronto Film Festival during its premiere. And I hope I'll be able to see it again and again. And I encourage all the viewers and all the listeners to do the same. Rafi, do you want to tell people where they can find the film if they want to see it?
Sure. So the film is out now, and it's available in select theaters across the country. It's actually in quite a few cinemas in and around the Miami area. But it's also available on demand as well. So however you rent and watch movies on your TV, it's there through Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, and what have you.
Awesome. I want to thank IFC Films and Tamar Simon at Mean Streets Management for helping make this event possible. I want to thank everyone who joined us and this is listening in from their homes, from their beds, wherever you are. We want to thank you for your support. I really want to just impress on everyone to give this film a chance, to tell their friends and friends of friends. This is a really remarkable movie, one of the best genre films of the year, just one of the best films of the year. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Wishing you only the best of luck and continued success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So much.